Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Alan Barry Labacan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. I've got another of my weekend reports for you, and if you were looking for a guarantee that the Federal Reserve is near the end of their relentless interest rate hikes that they've been on for several months now, you got that guarantee on Friday. The Silicon Valley Bank was taken over by the federal FDIC, and the Fed can ignore several things. They can ignore that the housing market is in trouble with all these interest rate hikes. They can ignore that the car sales are in trouble with all these interest rate hikes. They can ignore that the other big ticket items are in trouble. They can ignore that the consumer is stretched and paying loan shark interest rates. But what they will not ignore is when their favorite child, the banks, start running into trouble. And the Silicon Valley Bank is the second largest bank failure in the history of banking. Going back to 2008, that's what caused the start of the Great Recession, and I think that the Federal Reserve will not ignore this. Their banks, their over tightening is breaking things, and now it's breaking the banking, and that's going to be the end to their interest rate hikes. Maybe they got another quarter or two left in them at the next couple of meetings. I'm kind of skeptical. I think they might just stop at their next meeting. But whether they stop or do a couple of quarter points, they're definitely reaching the end of the road. They call it a terminal rate, being the highest rate that they can go to, and it's getting pretty damn terminal right now. And again, I don't see that the Federal Reserve will ignore when their favorite child starts getting into trouble, like the Silicon Valley Bank did. They've got $160 billion of Silicon Valley startup money tied up, and they got caught in a bad trade in the debt market, and I think that this will definitely stop the Federal Reserve's over tightening. If they continue, the dominoes, and maybe regardless of what they do, the dominoes will start to fall. The whole banking system is interlinked. And when you start having problems like this at one bank where the FDIC has to come in, it won't be long before others start having some problems. And as I was thinking about this, it made me wonder what happened to stress testing banks. Obviously, somebody was asleep at the wheel. Because this obviously couldn't handle the stress that it's under, and with the way the Federal Reserve has been raising interest rates, it's not a miracle that this has happened. So I think that they're having a emergency meeting of the Federal Reserve on Monday at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time. I think those emergency meetings are happening this week between the Treasury Department, the Federal Reserve, and big banks, big investors out there. I think there's going to be some the phone lines are going to be burning up this weekend. Everybody's a capitalist until you start having it affect your own bottom line. And this is definitely going to affect a lot of bottom lines in Silicon Valley. And that's one of the shining lights in the economy is all this nonsense money that's been going into into these tech startups. So like we need another social media site where people can, share their cat pictures. And this has been a very big misallocation of funds going into the tech startup industry. And now one of their, their big bank is in a lot of trouble. And another thing I wondered about is why was so many of these tech startups having all their money at Silicon Valley Bank? It makes me wonder, were they getting some special treatment there? So, yeah, I think that the phone lines are going to be burning up this weekend on how to bail out another big bank. And, the currency traders certainly didn't ignore what was happening. I'm going to pull up that chart right now so you can see what happened with the US dollar. Here we go. Okay, so there's the US dollar on Friday. And as you can see, it got pummeled pretty seriously. The day before, it was trading at about 10, almost 106. And by the end of yesterday, it was down to 103 and change. Right around, well, it traded as low as 104, closed at 104.637. I felt that this trend is the main one to watch. The US dollar started going into correction up here at about almost 115 on the US dollar index, and had a very sharp decline, a bearish January, a death cross in January, a bearish January effect. It did get a rally in here from pretty oversold, but I think this is just a counter trend rally. And now that the banks are having problems, I think the currency traders are starting to position themselves at the Federal Reserve. Well, I think they started to position themselves back here that the Federal Reserve is getting close to the end of their interest rate hikes. But I think that this positioning here will take it well below this 101 price and much lower. And this was very bullish for the gold price. As you can see, it had a nice spike up on Friday and almost closed right at the day high. It's been on a very bullish trend since this triple bottom in September and October, November. Then in early November, it blasted off. Again, I believe that this is counter to the US dollar action and a sign that the Federal Reserve was getting close to the end of their US dollar supportive interest rate hikes. But then it got toppy here and came down as the US dollar picked up some momentum. But again, I think this action is a counter trend action. It double bottomed here and is now starting a pretty big move. It almost closed at the 50-day moving average. I suspect that next week we're going to see it get well over 1900 and possibly even challenge 2000 over the next couple of weeks, 10 days, somewhere a week, 10 days kind of thing. And the big thing that I stress all the time is that I think the best way to play gold is with gold in the ground companies, junior mining stocks. And another good way is through silver, because where silver goes, so goes gold. Let's see how silver did on Friday. It was up. Here's the silver chart. As you can see, it started to improve, but is trading below the 200-day moving average. And this is often what happens when gold gets a cold. The silver gets even sicker. And when gold is going up, it tends to go up aggressively. It actually started its rally before gold, but then topped out around 24. It's looking pretty oversold here, and with my optimism for the price of gold, I think it's going to go up a lot. Basically, what I think is going to happen here is that not only do I think the Federal Reserve is close to ending their relentless interest rate hikes to fight inflation, and they've done it in such a way that they're starting to break some serious parts of the economy and now breaking the banking system. I think that it's overcooked, but the next big step will be quantitative easing, because now that the dominoes are starting to fall, they're going to have to be supportive of the banking system. And what that will mean is they'll stop raising interest rates, and then there'll be quantitative easing X. I don't even know which one it is now. There was so many of them over the last 2008 global economic slowdown. I think it's a hell of a time to be buying gold, silver, but the best way to play it is through the gold and silver stocks. Now, I also believe that quantitative easing is going to be very supportive of the electric vehicle revolution. And the electric vehicle revolution needs copper, it needs lithium, it needs plenty of other metals to build those electric vehicle cars. And so other base metals will do well as they do this quantitative easing, because ultimately I think this electric vehicle revolution is unstoppable. I think that we're moving towards more and more people using electric vehicles globally and in the United States, and I don't think that's going to stop. And so another thing that I think is important is recently, in the last couple of weeks, there was two big mining conferences. One was at the BMO mining conference, and one was at the Prospectors and Developers Annual Conference in Toronto, which is affectionately known as the PDAC. And what was sort of the big story out of those, I always look for the big story coming out of these conferences, and the big one was that the car makers are starting to show up at mining conferences, and they see the writing on the wall that they need more metals to keep the electric vehicle revolution going forward. More writing on the wall is that the central bankers of the world have been sort of signaling that they see problems as well, and they've been buying gold relentlessly. I think it's a bit of a return to the gold standard, if you will. Maybe not an official gold standard, but the central bankers of the world are definitely buying gold. And I think that that's their concern showing for the banking and the economic sector. So let's get into some gold and other metal stocks. And I've been putting out a lot of information on the on my Substack, and here is the Rocks and Stocks news on Substack. It's actually rocksandstocks.substack.com. This is one of the places that I put all my reports. The other place is on my YouTube channel at Rocks and Stocks News. And the combination of those two, what is different about Substack is I do writing some reports on Substack that is... So if you want all my coverage, I transitioned to using Substack about 6 months ago. So before that, you would have to look on YouTube, but everything going back to for about 6 months, you can find on my Substack. And this is the archive page. This shows you where all the recent and all the past articles have been. I'm just going to show you another thing that I think is really important. If you want to find out my key shopping list, you go on the front page of the rocksandstocks.substack.com. Here is a list of the sponsors that I have for my shows and the content I put out. And then you'll see additional pages in the Rocks and Stocks Index. So this is where I sort of keep track of all my key picks and my sponsors. And the first one that you'll see on this is I80 Gold. They are my go-to gold stock. They've got a tremendous group of assets in Nevada. They're completely focused on Nevada. In Nevada, they've got their Granite Creek project that looks like it's a 5 to 10 million ounce gold deposit that can get bigger. It's got about 600 meters of strike length in their South Pacific zone. What makes South Pacific quite exciting is it's a high grade deposit. It's got excellent continuity of the high grade. Continuity is king in this business. Everybody talks about grade being king. The reality is continuity is king, because that is what leads to high margin operations. And if continuity is king, then the queen is high margins. And at Granite Creek, it not only looks like they've got a high margin mine in the future, and in the 5 to 10 million ounce category, target category, it could get a lot bigger. It's open to the north. As you go to the north, you follow the same rock packages and the same structure where they've found the South Pacific zone, and it leads you to a 25 million ounce gold deposit. This is definitely an elephant country. And what's also exciting about the Granite Creek South Pacific zone is as you go deeper into it, you get higher and higher grades. So not only is it open to the north, but it's also open at depth. And I think that this is a special mine of the future. They started 2022 as that being their number one project, but then later in the year, their Ruby Hill project became number one. The reason for that is that they found the Ruby Deeps discovery of high-grade gold in a bulk underground mining kind of target. And then above that, they found their 426 zone, which is made up of a significant amount of oxide mineralization. And that's really important because at Ruby Hill, it was a former producing property, and they've got the facility to process oxide material. Now that's to the west of the old Archimedes pit. 426 is sort of a bit northwest. And then right underneath it, they're finding more of this high-grade gold. So it's kind of like a C shape to it that looks quite exceptional and wide open. But what's really caught the market's imagination is the Bonanza CRD that they found to the south of the old Archimedes pit. And Bonanza is what it is. They've got tremendous grades of your CRD metals, zinc, lead, and silver. But then they've got an overprint of high-grade gold. They've found 3 zones so far of that CRD, and then just to the immediate south of that, they've got this big geophysical anomaly, which looks like it could be the cause of that Bonanza CRD mineralization in the 3 zones so far. They've drilled a hole into that. I had an interview with Ewan Downey recently, and he was pretty hard to not notice how excited he was about that drilling into that 4H target, which he considers the number one target. But the story doesn't end there, because below the old Archimedes pit is another big geophysical anomaly that looks like it could be a porphyry. And Tyler Hill and the team did a webinar recently, and Tyler is their VP Exploration, and he mentioned that an important factor that when you have a porphyry that's associated with the CRD, they tend to be high-grade copper and gold porphyries. So they're going to drill some deep holes into that this year as well. I think they've got a tremendous story. I think they're a multi-billion-dollar company in the making. That's why they're my go-to stock for investors that want exposure to gold and precious metals and base metals, but also have less risk. So I think I80 Gold fits that bill very nicely. Now, another company I've talked a lot about is the company that's right beside I80 Gold, called Paycor Minerals. And at Paycor Minerals, they're also finding bonanza CRD with high grades of zinc, lead, silver, as well as an overprint of high grade to bonanza grade gold. I80 Gold has recently, in the last couple of weeks, made an announcement that they have made a takeover offer to take over Paycore. Since that announcement, Paycore shareholders are going to get 0.68 of a share in I80 Gold, and will be about a 10% share, own about 10% of the company. Now, what I think is going to happen is what's been happening. It's basically trading in lockstep to that ratio, 0.68 of the value of I80 Gold. So I do believe that gold is going to go up, and companies like I80 Gold are going to perform very well. But you might as well own I80 Gold, because in Paycore you're getting you could own either one of them. They're going to move in lockstep. So whichever one you choose, I think Paycore, it's maybe in April sometime the transaction will be completed. Who knows? Maybe there's a better offer coming out there from somebody. So, if you're into that kind of thing, Paycore would probably be the one you'd want to lean to. I just think that I80 Gold, the reason I'm so positive about this transaction for both companies is Paycor Minerals investors are going to get access to all the great assets that I80 Gold has. And I think that that's that will see the shareholders outperform what they would have had they stayed just with Paycore not getting taken over. So that's my number one go-to stock in gold is I80 Gold. They're taking over Paycor Minerals. But there's a little company called Golden Lake Exploration, where I'm an advisor to the company, that has the property right beside Paycore. Now, what makes this exciting is that a couple years ago, long before I80 Gold and Paycore started having all their success, Golden Lake actually drilled into a high grade to bonanza grade CRD as well, with high grade zinc, lead, silver, and an overprint of high grade to bonanza grade gold. And I think that they're in the same network of geology, rocks. They're in the same network of structures. And I think ultimately they've got a lot of good news ahead of them. That's why I think if you're looking for companies with a little more torque, yes, they will have more risk, but they also have more reward potential. And because of what's happening with I80 Gold and Paycore, I think Golden Lake Exploration is another good one for you to look at. Also in that Eureka mining camp near I80 Gold, Paycore, and Golden Lake is Timberline Resources. Now, Timberline Resources has been mainly focused on building a resource at their property to the south of Golden Lake. But I think that what really excites me about that resource is not the resource itself, is as they're drilling and building on that resource, all the rock packages and all the structures at depth are moving towards the east. And very close to where they have the resources, this big geophysical anomaly. And I think that geophysical anomaly is likely the cause of the resource. So I can't wait until they start drilling into that. But then in addition to those projects that they have at this to the south of Eureka, right beside Paycore, they have their New York Canyon project, where they not too long ago announced the results of a bunch of surface sampling that they did throughout that project. And this is an important project because it was a CRD mining on that property as well. And now they're finding a whole bunch of surface sampling with the high grades of silver, lead, zinc, as well as overprinted gold, which is sort of, it's in immediately beside Golden Lake and just slightly to the east of I80 Gold. So Timberline is another one that I'm very bullish on. As you can see here, all of these companies so far are sponsors of my shows. Walker River Resources is also a sponsor of my shows, and they're in the Walker Lane trend of Western Nevada. And what they found there is widespread gold mineralization in what I call the Lapon Mountain. And it has widespread high up to high grade bonanza grades over an area of about 600 meters from side to side, and from top to bottom in the mountain. It's got about 800 meters. Inside of that is a network of structures, and then a big alteration zone. So the structures are what brings the gold up from deeper. And when that gold-bearing fluids make their way up towards the surface and they interact with the country rock, it chemically alters that country rock. And so they've got a big zone of mineralization from a few grams up to bonanza grades, widely distributed throughout this mountain. They've got the network of structures. They've got this big alteration zone. And I think that they've easily got a 2 to 5 million ounce target on their hands, and those are not easy to find. So I'm really bullish on Walker River Resources as well. Another Nevada play that I'm bullish on is Blackrock Silver. They're a sponsor of the Rocks and Stocks news report. Their key asset is their Tonopah, Nevada, where they found a resource of high-grade silver and gold that is similar in size and grade to the maiden resource that Silvercrest had on their Las Chispas mine. Now, Las Chispas is very exciting because it is a very low-cost producer and a high grade, and that makes for high margins. I'm going to talk about them later, but rest assured, I think that Las Chispas is a tremendous mine, and I think that Blackrock Silver has the making of a Las Chispas important mine of the future that will be mined by a much bigger company when they take over Blackrock Silver for that asset. In the meantime, they've also got another project with silver and gold in it that I'm very excited about, called their Silver Cloud project. And at Silver Cloud a few months ago, they announced that they tagged a epithermal vein with bonanza grades of gold, 70 grams of gold and several hundred grams of silver. And what's important about these epithermal veins is when you tag into the boiling zone of an epithermal vein, and that's exactly what they did at the Silver Cloud project. And now they've got to go in there and keep pounding away at that boiling zone to expand it. But these are exciting seminal moments when you're exploring an epithermal vein, and you start tagging the boiling zone of that epithermal vein. In addition to that, they've also got exposure to a lithium project. They were looking for silver and they found lithium. Then they brought in a partner to advance that. So this company has, got great silver and gold projects, also got exposure to lithium. I think it's very oversold at its current valuation. And I think as gold and silver start rocking and rolling here, that Blackrock Silver will join the party in a big way. Another company in Nevada that I'm really excited about is kind of an underloved or undiscovered gem, if you will, is a company called Athena Gold. They're also a sponsor of my show, The Reports at Rocks and Stocks News. And they're a new addition. I think they came in around January. Yeah, it was January. And what got me excited about that project is that they're in an oxide gold deposit. You know, 0.5 gram to 1 gram is usually what you're talking about. You're usually not talking about 10 to 15 grams of gold, you know, high grade gold in an underground operation. In an oxide situation, that is certainly bonanza grades for an oxide. The grades that they found in 3 holes can be considered bonanza grades for an oxide deposit. And I'm actually working on an article, and I want to show everybody that they've got 2 key faults, one on the north and one on the south. And then in between those 2 faults, they got this very big alteration area. As I said earlier, alteration is important because as the fluids follow those faults or cracks in the earth, fluids with gold bearing, they will then get towards the surface and interact with the country rock. They chemically alter that country rock. So when you see these big alteration zones contained inside of 2 big faults, and then you drill into it, and it's kind of even on the outside of one of those, the main big alteration zone, I'm going to show that in the article I write as well, is where they hit 3 holes with excellent continuity of bonanza grades for an oxide discovery. And yet this company has a super tiny valuation. And I think they've got a great project in Nevada that you'll hear a lot more about in the near term. Another key area that Nevada's a key area that I've followed for many years, but another key type of gold deposit that I follow are called orogenic gold deposits. Why these are so important is you look at the Fosterville mine in Australia. When they found the Swan Zone in that orogenic gold system, and Kirkland Lake started mining that, it turned out to be a super low cost producer of a very high grades, and that made for super high margins. And because of that high margin production, Kirkland Lake was one of the best performing gold mining companies in the business. And they ultimately were bought out at a substantial premium for almost all the shareholders. So Kirkland Lake was not a small company when they started mining the Swan Zone. And if it can be a company maker for that size of a company, I can only imagine what it can do for a junior. And I've got a few juniors that are involved in orogenic gold exploration. And one of those is Sokoman Minerals. They're a sponsor of the Rocks and Stocks News Reports. They've gone through a seminal moment in the exploration of an orogenic gold system. Most of their drilling was fairly close to surface within the first couple 100 meters. And then with their deepest hole in the eastern trend, they hit 3 meters of 102 grams per ton gold. That was part of a 10-meter intersection of 42 grams per ton gold. So bonanza grades. And when you start tagging bonanza grades in an orogenic gold system, that is a seminal moment. It's called the 463 zone. It's definitely what you would consider a jewelry box hit, like the Swan Zone at Fosterville. Now, I'm not saying that it is another Swan Zone, but it could be. They've drilled a couple of holes into that. And that argument is holding up that this could in fact be something like the Swan Zone. Right now they're drilling. They're using wedged holes. So they go down with a mother hole and then they put wedges in that can deflect the drill rig to move at different angles to attack this 463 zone. I think they're going to generate a lot of great news off of that 463 zone, and it will be a really important driver of their valuation. Another important driver of their valuation is their project in lithium in Newfoundland as well. It's very early days, but what I'm seeing so far suggests to me that not only could they have the right kind of grades to mine a hard rock lithium deposit, but it could be a very big system. And those two assets combined, the lithium and the orogenic gold system at their Moosehead project, I think ultimately what you're going to see is those two assets will be split, and the shareholders of Sokoman will get shares in a new company that's focused on the lithium, and then Silkman Minerals will focus in on their stay focused like they have been on their orogenic gold system at Moosehead. So there's one of my top orogenic gold stories, gold exploration stories. Another one is Galantas Gold, and they're a sponsor of the Rocks and Stocks news reports as well. Their orogenic gold system is in Northern Ireland. What I like about this system is they've got a series of veins, two main ones, Joshua and Kearney. Then they've got another one in the middle of it and a couple of others on the side, and they're closely packed into a close proximity to each other. And these orogenic gold zones, they tend to go very deep because the cracks in the earth are very deep. They're called crustal cracks or crustal faults. And these orogenic gold systems can go down 2, 3, 4, 5,000 meters. And as you get deeper, you're getting closer to the heat engine that caused the fluids and the gold to make their way up closer to surface. Now, most of their drilling has been contained within the first couple hundred meters of surface. And what excites me is that I think that all of those zones are going to come together as they go deeper. And as they go deeper, the grades are going to get higher and higher grade. Now, bear in mind that they've already started to hit the high grade to bonanza grades. They've got a series of dilation zones. This is where the zones open up and allow more fluids with gold in them but these dilation zones and the gold mineralization inside this network of tightly spaced zones, I think is going to lead them deeper and deeper. And as they get deeper, I think you're going to see higher and higher grades, and that they all come together. To the immediate south of this network of zones, gold zones, they've got a big fault structure that is, the conduit that the metals bearing fluids follow from much deeper. So all of these things I think are interrelated, and I think they've got a hell of an orogenic gold system on their hands. And I'm really excited about the prospects as they get deeper into that, the various different zones that they have. Dynasty Gold is a new sponsor that came in January. And why I like this project is they're in the very early days of starting to get deeper. Most of their drilling and the historical drilling was done very close to surface, let's say within the first 100 meters. But then they drilled a 250 meters, 3 holes. And what they hit was really quite remarkable. 1.5 meters of 246 grams of gold. They had a 3 meter hit that was over 100 grams. Another hole hit 43 grams per ton of gold over 3 meters. And what's interesting is you take one historical hole, and then you can start to see those high-grade hits lining up in those 3 holes that I just mentioned, where you've got high-grade continuity of your high-grade and bonanza-grade golds in 4 holes lining up. And I would guess that the distance is about 100 meters of continuity in that one zone. And then below that, they tagged another zone that could be a parallel zone of bonanza grades to high grades as well. And yet, you know, the company, I don't think is getting the kind of love that they should for, you know, tagging into a jewelry box of a orogenic gold system so close to surface within the first 250 meters that, you know, you start hitting 1.5 meters at 246 grams per ton of gold. That's pretty spectacular stuff. And then you want to see the continuity, and they've got that as well. So I'm very bullish on Dynasty Gold's orogenic gold system in Ontario near the town of Dryden, really close proximity to a road. So they're going to be able to get after that in a big way. Amex Exploration is another orogenic gold system that I've been following since they were a 50-cent stock. After that, they went up over $4. Currently, they're trading at about $1.50. I think they're very, very cheap considering what they've found. They've got their high-grade zone in an orogenic system starts at surface and goes down to over 1,000 meters of depth. Now, that 1,000 meters sounds like a lot, but in the Red Lake gold mine, they went down 1,000 meters to get into those high bonanza grades, and it continued for another 1,000 meters. So that's the nature of these high-grade underground mines. And when Goldcorp was mining the Red Lake mine at those depths, they were the lowest cost producer in the gold mining business, and had extremely high grades, high margins, and their stock performed extremely well when that was the main focus of the company. And so I think that Amex has a gold mine of the future at their high grade zone. They've also got a series of other zones. Some of it's low grade and up near surface where you can open pit mine it. And even in an open pit target, those grades are pretty high grade, low grade, if you will. And then they've got other high grade zones that are in close proximity to their main high grade zone. And these are all are closely in close proximity to each other. And then you go a little bit to the east, and these 2 key faults come together as you move to the east. This is a perfect conduit for how the fluids made their way up to the surface and then spread out into these zones that they have. And I think that's exactly what is going to happen is as they go deeper, I think all of their high-grade zones can come together, and the conduit or crack in the earth or fault will be just to the immediate east of where they found all these zones, and these 2 faults come together. I think they're a takeover target of the future that will be bought out by a much bigger company and at probably significant premium to their current valuation. Base metal stocks. My favorite base metal stock is 9 Mile Metals. And they're in the Bathurst mining camp of New Brunswick. This is the 3rd most important VMS mining camp in the world, and VMS mining camp in the world. And 9 Mile Metals has gone in there with more modern exploration techniques and technology than when a lot of the exploration in this camp was done back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And they're finding new massive sulfide occurrences in their drilling. The one that really had me excited is their 9 Mile Brook lens. This is a 10 to 20 meter wide lens that daylights, comes right to surface, and has high grades, even more than 10% of copper. And that makes for one of the best discoveries in the entire camp. And, you know, that's saying a lot, because this camp had one of the best VMS mines ever in the world at Brunswick 12, which is about 10 kilometers away from that 9 Mile Brook lens area. And now at 9 Mile Brook lens, they're drilling right now. And I'm very optimistic that they've got a good chance to find the rest of that lens. And if the lens, as it should be, is an indicator of the grade potential and the size potential at the top of a system, it's indicative that the rest of the system should be big and high grade as well. So I'm very excited about the drilling that they're currently doing there. And that's really caused most of the attention for the company. But while they were waiting for the permits to get back in and drill at the 9 Mile Brook lens area, they went over about 20 kilometers to the west, and they hit their California Lake massive sulfide occurrences. And again, you're at the top of the system, you're already finding high grade. And that tells you that the source of that high grade mineralization in the massive sulfide occurrences in their drilling should be quite exceptional as well. So now they've got 20 meters apart, or 20 kilometers apart. They've got two excellent new massive sulfide occurrences in one of the most important VMS mining locations worldwide, and they have yet to find the source of that mineralization. And stay tuned for drilling results out of 9 Mile Metals, because I'm very bullish on their story. Now, next up is my own company, Advanced Lithium, where I'm the CEO and president and a big shareholder. We had two big news releases out in March so far. On March the 9th, we announced that we've acquired from Wolfden 170 square kilometers of projects in the Bathurst mining camp that I was just talking about in New Brunswick. What's exciting about this is that it's got 7 known deposits that were explored back in the 50s and 60s with resources on them. Now they're not non-compliant, 43101 non-compliant, and the work was done many decades ago. So I have to put in all the disclosures that this is non-compliant. We're only using that as references to where we would focus our future drilling, but it's got these non-compliant 7 non-compliant resources on it, has a whole slew of massive sulfide occurrences that need to be followed up with drilling. There's a boulder field of high-grade boulders that the bedrock source of those boulders has never been found. And it's also got an epithermal vein field where the Wolfden has already hit the boiling zones of epithermal veins, that makes for an exceptional story on an epithermal vein system, because when you start finding the boiling zone of an epithermal vein, it can get very exciting. And this is what makes up a lot of the big, great silver and gold mines of the world are epithermal veins. And they've already drilled into those boiling zones, and that's the seminal moment for an epithermal vein. So those have to be followed up at the southern end of a rock package that has a pretty good bend to it. Right at the bottom of that bend is the Canoe Landing Lake resource, again, non-compliant, 43101. The work was done back in the 50s and 60s, but it's already a sizable resource and needs to be followed up. And what's exciting about that project is that the technical report on that, they believe that that's debris flow, and the main VMS body has not been found. So if the debris flow is that big, you know, it says a lot about the potential of the rest of the massive sulfide. And then over on the eastern side of the group of claim blocks is two big claim blocks that are right beside the Brunswick number 6 mine, and then not very far from the Brunswick number 12 mine. Now, these are the two most important, two of them. Well, the Brunswick 12 was the most important. It's one of the most important VMS mines anywhere in the world. And we've got a big chunk of ground right to the immediate south of that Brunswick number 12. What's also important is that Brunswick number 12 and number 6 were contained at the contact of two important rock packages. And those rock packages are also throughout the claims that we have done a deal to acquire from Wolfden. So this is a big claim block in an old mining camp that it's this classic story of going back into one of these old mining camps and using modern exploration methods and technology to unlock potential. 9 Mile Metals is doing that in the Brunswick mining camp, and Calanex, which I'll talk about later, is doing that in Manitoba, a very well-known massive sulfide mining area. And they're finding new deposits, and that's made their stock perform extremely well. So it's one of those kind of classic stories, and I'm really excited about getting involved with that. And I think it complements the news release that we had on March the 1st, where we announced that we have these 13 lithium and potassium salars, or salt lakes in Mexico. And the Mexican government has started a national Mexican lithium mining company. And we've gone into discussions with the Lithium-X, it's called, about creating a joint venture. And we talked about a lot of good things in that news release. I go to our website at advancedlithiumcorp.com, and you can find that news release. And then in addition to that, we also have a 57 square kilometer property to the north of the Las Chispas mine that's owned by Silvercrest. And that's an epithermal vein field at Las Chispas. And on our Serape project to the immediate north, there's two big veins. One's 5 kilometers, one's 2 kilometers. I got these projects because I believe that the minimal previous drilling, like maybe a half a dozen holes in total, has not hit the boiling zone of those epithermal veins. And so at Serape, we have, we're right beside a big mine. We've got 2 underexplored veins, the potential to find more, and the potential to find the boiling zone of those epithermal known veins and any that we find in the future. So we've got lithium covered, we've got gold and silver covered in Serape in Mexico, and then over in New Brunswick, Canada, we've got silver there as well, and also your base metals. So we're kind of covering all of this story about the electric vehicle revolution, but then also have exposure to gold at Serape. So we've got a nice mix of projects now, and a lot of good things are going to happen out of those 3 projects, I'm quite certain of. All right, diamonds. Arctic Star Exploration is a sponsor, and it's the only diamond company that I follow really closely. I got another one on my radar screen that I'm going to talk about in the not too distant future, but as it sits right now, Arctic Star is the only diamond company that I'm really following closely. And, you know, diamonds could, I think they are the best top contrary play in the mining sector. The reason that I say that is that diamond prices are at all-time highs right now. Yet the diamond stocks, whether you're looking at explorers or producers, are getting zero love right now. That's a good time to be a contrarian. And I believe that Arctic Star has an excellent discovery up in the Lac de Gras area of the Northwest Territories. The two big Canadian diamond mines are the Acadian and Diavik mines, and they've got the ground that's right beside that. They're finding new diamond-bearing kimberlites. At the early stages, you got to look at what's called a diamond distribution curve and the diamond indicator minerals to assess the potential of finding big and high quality diamonds. Now, I've spent a lot of my career in diamond exploration. In fact, I was a co-author of a paper, a peer-reviewed paper that talked about unique diamond indicator minerals and their importance in exploration. We wrote that back in 2004. And and Arctic Star has some of those unique diamond indicator minerals that are only known to occur with very large diamonds. So they've got the indications that they should have big diamonds and high quality diamonds. And, you know, if the diamond business were like it was maybe 10 years ago, this company would have north of a 200 to somewhere in the 200 to 500 million valuation range. And yet now you can buy it for, you know, pennies on the dollar, if you will. I'm a big fan of what they've got up there in the Northwest Territories. Arctic Star Exploration is one to take a look at. Okay, now, so if you believe like I do that the Fed is getting near the end of their interest rate hikes because of what's happened with the Silicon Valley Bank and other economic indicators that suggest that they're over tightening, if you're not into the exploration plays to get your exposure to gold in the ground and silver in the ground and other metals in the ground, another great way to play that is what I call cash making machines of mines. And when there's a bull market for gold stocks and silver stocks, the ones that get the best premiums are those that have high margin operations. So they got low cost of production, high grade, and high margins. So those are the characteristics you want to look for in a mining company. And I've got a few to talk about here. One of them is Silvercrest Metals. Now, I've talked earlier about Silvercrest when I was talking about Blackrock Silver, because they've got something that looks a lot like Silvercrest Las Chispas mine. And I also mentioned it when I was talking about my own company, Advanced Lithium, because we have the project that is to the north, just to the immediate north of the Las Chispas mine. We have 57 square kilometers there. Now, what makes Las Chispas very exciting is that it's a high grade, low cost, high margin mine that just went into commercial production in November. Now, as an investor, what this creates is, I want to talk about the Lassonde curve. Pierre Lassonde is one of the most successful people ever in the mining business. And he came out with what he calls the Lassonde curve. And what you see is tiny little juniors start down here, they make a discovery and they get a big bump in their price. But then they start what's called the development discount window, and they start coming down because now they got to run the economics. They've got to assess how big the deposit is. They've got to do the permitting. They got to build the mine, and it goes into what's called the development discount window for a very long period of time, sometimes 7 to 10 years. And then the next big spike is when they go into commercial production. And right now, the valuation of Silvercrest Metals is at the valuation where they brought it into full commercial production. So they're still being priced at the end of the development discount window. And why that happens in the early days of a new mine is because they do a feasibility study, a bankable feasibility study, and then they start producing. And the number crunchers at these big institutions, they want to compare the feasibility numbers to the production numbers. And it takes a couple quarters to really understand how they compare. Now, it's important to note that in the feasibility study that Silvercrest did, it was done a couple years ago, and there's been a significant amount of inflation. But they were starting at a very low base, about $6.70 cost of producing an ounce of silver. Silver's trading at over $20 an ounce. So let's say even if they were, if the price of silver or cost goes up by 50%, okay, that would still have them producing silver at one of the lowest cost, under $10 an ounce per silver ounce produced. Now, the other great thing about this project is it's got very high grades in the feasibility study. Now, that doesn't get affected by inflation. I think those numbers are going to stand up. You're talking about 700 plus grams of silver per ton. So it's even if inflation affects the cost, it's still got a very high grade to produce and a high margin, and that margin will only get better as the price of silver goes up. And so I'm a big fan of Silvercrest, and for the investor that wants exposure to silver and gold mining, which is the mine that Las Chispas is, this one gives you less downside risk, but gives you a lot of upside potential. Another high margin producer of gold is Orla Mining. They're in Zacatecas state, which is the state of Mexico that I live in. Their mine's about 100 miles from where I live. It's called Camino Rojo. It's an oxide project that has very low costs, probably in the top 10 of low-cost producers of gold in the mining business. That's going to generate a lot of free cash flow. They put that into production in 2022. The stock has been doing very well over the last 6 months or so. And as gold goes higher, I think that Orla Mining is going to go a lot higher. So that's another one that's a good exposure for the investor that wants to be exposed to a gold stock with less downside risk. And I really believe that as gold goes higher, something like Orla Mining will significantly outperform the price of gold. Mag Silver is also in the state of Zacatecas, and they've got one of the top, they will be one of the top 2 lowest cost silver producers in the world. They've got a great mine in the state of, near the city of Fresnillo in the state of Zacatecas, Mexico. And what is really important is about a month ago, they got plugged into the national power grid. So that's going to enable them to get up to full nameplate production at their mine. And again, this is the kind of thing for those that want a little less risk, but be exposed to a silver mining company. Mag Silver is a great candidate for you. All right. I also follow a high growth royalty company called Orogen Royalties. Why I say that they're a high growth royalty company is because they've kind of just went through a seminal moment in that they had a whole portfolio of royalty assets, but none of them had turned into mines yet. And they did have that event happen in 2022 when the Ermitaño mine started to be flowing cash, where they own a 2% royalty on that. And so they are now a cash flowing royalty company. They also have a 1% interest in the royalty on the Silicon project in Nevada, which is quickly becoming one of the most exciting oxide gold discoveries in the mining business. And that's being developed by Anglo Gold Ashanti. They came out with their maiden resource, and it was about 4 million ounces of oxide gold. That's going to be a mine of the future. But what makes it interesting is they've got the Silicon deposit, and then right to the south of that, they've got the Merlin deposit, which looks like it could be as big or maybe even bigger. And Orogen Royalties has a 1% royalty on that as well. And then they've got a whole slew of other projects that could turn into future royalties. I really think that this is a company that's transitioning from having a whole bunch of royalty assets that weren't mines. Now they do have a cash flowing royalty at Ermitaño. And I think in the not too distant future, Silicon in Nevada will be a cash flowing royalty. And they've got a lot of other very highly prospective royalty projects being explored by major and junior mining companies. And this company is really good at picking projects, and I like the future of Orogen Royalties. In fact, I'm working on getting them on a show here in the not too distant future. All right, a lot of times tax loss selling season at the end of the year sees a lot of stocks getting beaten down purely for tax considerations. It's not considerations of their actual projects. It's more because the investors want to lock in their losses to write off against their gains. And this gets a lot of stocks very beaten down. And I've got a group that I had on my 2022 tax loss selling season picks. Blackrock Silver, I already talked about earlier. HighGold Mining is up in Alaska, and they've got what I think is a 2 to 5 million ounce gold project where they already have a resource of over 1 million ounces of gold on it. And it's got a very handsome grade of about 10 grams per ton of gold. I think that this company is going to be a takeover target of the future. And another interesting thing about HighGold Mining is they have other projects, one in the Yukon and one in Ontario, that they're going to be spinning out to the shareholders. So the current shareholders of HighGold Mining are going to get shares in another company, and then HighGold Mining will stay focused on their Alaska asset. And I think I think that they're a deep value play just for Alaska, and let alone this spin out opportunity. So HighGold Mining was one of my 2022 tax loss selling season picks. Firefox Gold was as well. Why I like Firefox Gold is they're in Finland. And Finland is becoming a very exciting place. It's an orogenic gold camp. Firefox looks like they're into orogenic gold discoveries. They've got a large land package. They were one of the early movers into Finland. And therefore, they got some really attractive projects. And they've also already shown that it looks like they're drilling into orogenic gold systems. So they're kind of let's say they're at the early stages compared to their peers that have much more advanced orogenic gold discoveries and a lot more work and a lot higher valuations. But if you believe in Finland, like I believe in Finland, I believe that Firefox is the way to play it, because they've got that, they're at the bottom before in the Lassonde curve that you see that big exploration success. And I think that they're on the verge of being one of those, performers like in the first wave of the Lassonde curve on exploration success. I already talked about Amex Exploration. Bell Copper, I just did an interview with the CEO of that company last week, or earlier this week, actually. It's Saturday today that I'm taping this show. And they're in Arizona. They're drilling for a very big target of a copper project. Arizona is elephant country for these big behemoths of copper deposits. And I think these guys got a shot of finding one. They're currently drilling right now. And you want to watch this one very closely, because if it looks like they've tagged, they did hit a hole that I think just clipped the edge of an elephant. And now they're drilling right through the guts of the elephant. And if it proves that they do have an elephant, this stock will skyrocket. And if you're into the lottery ticket picks that have the potential of, just going parabolic, Bell Copper is a good one for you, especially if you're bullish on copper like I am. So yeah, take a look at that recent interview that I did with Tim Marsh from Bell Copper, and I think you'll understand why I'm bullish on that company. Grand Portage is also in Alaska. They got a resource of over 1 million ounces of gold at about 10 grams. That's an exciting thing because there's not a lot of those kind of projects out there, and they got room to grow it. And I think ultimately that this has a good potential of being a mine that Grand Portage will not be the miner of. I think if it does become a mine, it will be bought out by a much bigger company and be a very good performer for the shareholders of Grand Portage. All right. On February the 12th, I put out a report, and because in February, gold started to have a counter trend move in an early days of a bull market, nothing goes straight up. You get these counter trend moves. But when you have these counter trend moves, that's a great time to be adding companies. And I did exactly that on February the 12th. One of those companies was a company called Faraday Copper. And Faraday Copper has come out of the gates in 2023 just on fire. They've had a bunch of great drill results. They announced I need to update this because they actually closed more than $30 million dollars in their financing that they did. Now they've got plenty of money to aggressively go after this high-grade copper project in Arizona. I'm very bullish on this project and this company. I'm very bullish on copper, but finding good copper stories is hard. And Faraday Copper has one of those good copper stories in Arizona. Relevant Gold is, they're a new company that I've started following for an orogenic gold discovery in Wyoming. They've, on their near surface drilling, they've already tagged bonanza grades of gold, which is a seminal moment for an orogenic gold system. When I was talking about my orogenic gold systems before, it's when you get into these jewelry box, bonanza grade gold parts of an orogenic gold system that things get really exciting. Relevant Gold has one of those stories, and I like that story a lot. I've tried my hardest to get Faraday Copper and Relevant Gold on an interview, but they haven't taken me up on that offer yet, but I'll keep following them, and because they're picks. Golden Ridge Resources is another one that's a recent pick, and I actually did an interview with their CEO not too long ago, about in the last 2 weeks. And what makes me excited about this orogenic gold story is that one of the big success stories for orogenic gold discovery is a company called Newfound Gold in Newfoundland. And so they've got this what's called the Appleton Fault. And these are these crustal structures that go down very, very deep. And they become the conduit for the gold mineralization to make its way up to surface. And as it gets up closer to surface, what often happens is these big faults also cause secondary faulting. And that's what gets injected with these high-grade gold fluids in an orogenic gold system. And Newfound Gold has tagged into several zones in a orogenic gold system with high-grade to bonanza grades of gold, and it's got good continuity to some of the zones as well. And they've got an $800 million valuation. Now, Golden Ridge has a tiny valuation, but what excites me about them is the Appleton Fault, as it keeps going to the south, you then run into Golden Ridge's project. And Newfound has a lot of that Appleton Fault. But where they've had all their success is where there's a series of gold occurrences in very close proximity from the surface sampling. And the next big cluster like that is on Golden Ridge's property, where they've got a cluster of these gold occurrences, and it's right on either side of the Appleton Fault. They've done a bunch of drilling, 21 holes. Those results are pending. If they get any sniffs of having been high grade to bonanza grade, I think that it will quickly trade at multiples of its current valuation. So this is another lottery pick kind of story. And if you like those kind of stories like I do, you want to take a look at Golden Ridge Resources, and you can do that by going to the interview that I did with their CEO recently. Emergent Metals is an interesting project in Quebec. They haven't had their assay results out. Those are pending. But what they did announce is that they found visible gold in their recent drilling. And when you can see visible gold on the outside of the core, it's often a good indication that there's high-grade gold inside the core as well. So this is another swing for the fences pick that I made recently. And I really like their potential. I like Quebec a lot because it's one of the best mining jurisdictions in the world, whether you're an explorer, developer, or a miner. And yeah, I'm keeping a close eye on Emergent Metals. Summa Silver is another one that I'm keeping a close eye on because they've got a very high-grade silver discovery in New Mexico. And I think this will ultimately drive their valuation much higher. They're already comparing it to some of the great silver discoveries worldwide, and that's not wishful thinking. You look at the drill results, and it tells you that's the category that they're in. Now, they've got to wait a while before they get back in there and do some more drilling, but now is the time over the next couple months when you can, if you get any chance to buy it on any dips. Although with silver going up the way I think it's going to go up, I don't think you're going to get a lot of bargains on Summa Silver, even though they may not be drilling for a little while. But that's a silver exploration story that I'm very bullish on. Masivo Silver is in Nevada. I just realized I have to put them up into the Nevada category where I talk about sponsors, because this company is a sponsor of my reports. And I've already done an interview with them, and about 6 weeks ago. And it was with their DP Exploration, and he's a really sharp guy and has an interesting story because he was part of Mine Finders, And Minefinders was one of the big success stories in the mining business, gold mining business, and precious metals business in the last couple decades. And the guy who was the CEO is part of the team at Masivo Silver as well. So they're well represented by guys that know what big deposits look like, how to explore them, and how to extract the valuation for the shareholders. And what is interesting about this project is it saw mining back in World War II, and some just spectacular grades on that mine. But then it went into nothing was done on it for many decades. And in the last 20 years, there was some drilling done on it. But these guys believe that the angle of the drilling was not optimal for the direction of the mineralization. So they went in there with angled holes, cutting into it on what they think is the correct angle. And they have not had the assay results out yet, but they did talk about the mineralization that they've hit. And the theory was that they wanted to go underneath the old mining and see if that mineralization continued, which they showed with the drilling. So they were trying to prove two things: that the previous drilling that was done in the last couple of decades didn't go in it with the right angled of holes. So they proved that. And they wanted to know if that high-grade to super bonanza grades continued. They know the mineralization continues, and now they're waiting to see the assay results. I'm very optimistic about the team, the project, the grades that were found in the past. And I'm going to update my index, because Masivo Silver will be put up into the Nevada category. And also as a sponsor of the shows. But yes, they are a sponsor of my reports at Rocks and Stocks. And then a new pick that I made on February the 17th is a company called Barksdale Resources. What makes them interesting is that they're in Arizona. One of the big winners in the mining business over the past decade was a company called Arizona Mining. And those that have followed my reports for a long time will have heard about Arizona Mining, because I covered them when they were about a 50-cent stock. They then went on to find the Taylor deposit, CRD deposit, carbonate replacement deposit in Arizona, and they ultimately got bought out for $2 billion. The Taylor CRD is got very good grades in it, and it's very big. But what's interesting is that they may only have half of the deposit. It looks like that other half is on Barksdale Resources property. Now, Barksdale Resources has been going through a permitting process over the past couple of years that it now looks like they're at the end of. They could get their permits over the next 3 to 4 months. And the drilling that's been done on their side of the project shows that that Taylor deposit continues onto their property. And then there's also a porphyry. So porphyries are your heat engine that these CRDs come off of. And there's room to fit another Taylor deposit on their property. And, they've got a very cheap valuation relative to that potential. The only reason you're able to buy it at this cheap valuation is because they've been going through this permitting process. And I think as soon as that permit is issued and they start drilling, the fireworks are going to start. So you kind of got a little bit of time here to get your lottery ticket. But I think that this lottery ticket is going to pay off. And that's why I make Barksdale Resources a pick on February the 17th. And I interviewed their management as well not long after. You can find all of my, I'm going to close it off here actually and go back off of stop share. I'm a big proponent of investors First of all, you got to speak with your financial advisors. Why you do that is because you have to assess whether these companies I talk about or any company you're considering investing is suitable for you. And my shows are only for information purposes. That's it. It's your job to talk to your financial advisors about any company I talk about. And most importantly, do your homework on those companies. Now, I jumpstart you in that because a lot of the companies that I follow in my reports and make as picks or as sponsors, I do interviews with those companies. And those interviews you can find on Substack at rocksandstocks.substack.com. And that's for about the last 6 months. I've been putting all my reports on there. But if you want to go beyond that, you can go to my YouTube channel at Rocks and Stocks News at YouTube. And you can find, since I turned I've got tons of interviews on there as well. All my video stuff goes on YouTube and Rocks and Stocks News at our Rocks and Stocks at Substack.com, rocksandstocks.substack.com. But then I also do written reports on the Substack as well. So that's where you can find my stuff. It's a good place for you to start doing your homework on these companies. But then you can do more by going to their websites, looking at their news releases, looking at their corporate presentations. And I'm a big proponent of doing your homework because in my career in mining, the people that have made the big money are those that understand the companies that they're invested in. They have reasonable timeframes to allow those companies to meet their potential, and they're the ones that are the most successful because they're basing their investments on logic. When you watch the fluctuations on a day-to-day basis to assess whether you should look at investing in something, you tend to make emotional trades. But those homework-driven, logical investment decisions are what usually are the most lucrative because they're made on logic and homework, not on emotions. And if there's one thing I can point you to being a successful investor, and this applies whether you're looking in at mining stocks or any sector, is to do your homework and understand the companies you're invested in, why you're investing in them, and giving them reasonable time frames to reach their potential. On that note, have a great day and we'll talk to you soon.